You've reached Monster 911, and I'm Lance Hightower. I've been taking cryptid emergency calls for over 5 years. If you have a cryptid emergency, please call our toll-free number 866-306-8085. I can help you. What's your emergency? Hey guys, this is Lance with Monster 911. Glad to be with you once again. I hope everybody's doing well out there. I've been busy doing a lot of writing. There's no writer's block for me. I just keep continuing. I got a lot of ideas rolling around that are just coming out here. I've got a lot of book ideas, and I just have to keep a pad and pencil next to me because I have a lot of books I want to write for you guys. Some of the subjects are that I'm aware of. No one has really organized it in such a way what I'm writing about. So I hope you guys will like when I get my books out. In the meantime, I'm working on a show for you, something that I've never really done before. You're definitely going to want to tune into that. And actually, that's a sit-down show. You can listen to it at work or whatever, but you're going to want to sit down and actually watch this show. It's kind of an interview / documentary. The guy has had some very interesting things happen throughout his life, and it's what he did when he was a child, him and his brothers and sisters, what they saw and what they did to this cryptid that is really hair-raising and very descriptive on this interview. And that'll be coming out in about a week. But for tonight, I've got a special show for you. I had a gentleman call me. We'll be interviewing both him and his daughter. I always say that real life is stranger than fiction. That applies tonight for sure. So get ready, relax, sit back, listen, learn all you can, and listen to what this gentleman and his daughter experienced.
Okay, my name is Shawn. I'm an archaeologist, and I've worked in the field of archaeology about a decade and a half, and I've had a lot of experience going into deep woods, working on large parcels of forested properties. And during that, I've noticed quite a bit of strange tree structures, and I've seen tracks before that were more of a squatch type track. Also, I've noticed things in the woods like the bent trees, and smelled different scents in the air that were kind of odd and strange. That didn't smell like normal animals. So the other thing is I've done research with cryptids for about 5 years or so, and casually, but mainly with Dogman more than Squatch, and also looked into other things, paranormal and ley lines, etc. I've been into more of like UFOs and alien research for quite a while, maybe a decade and a half or more. But the Dogman and other cryptids are more of a recent thing.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Maya, and I'm gonna be describing the events that happened during this trip.
Great.
I just want to note that this happened in West Virginia, and we were up there working on my dad's. He had a friend, and we went to her farm, and we were just doing some farm work up there for 2 weeks. And like my dad said, he did know about Dogman and Sasquatch and different types of cryptids. So when we were up there, it's not like we weren't educated about it or weren't informed or aware.
Okay.
But we went up there for farm work and didn't really expect what happened. Although some other paranormal type things happened on that property before, like glowing spherical orbs descending in the forest. Another local person seeing what was referred to as like a large hyena wolf creature that had a lot of drool out of its mouth, that was up on the side of a house creeping around. I guess that was maybe a year or so ago. But yeah, so there's been some activity up there in that area.
Okay.
So I have everything dated in a chronological order of how things happened.
Okay.
And so I'm gonna begin with like the first day that we were there.
Sure.
We got there on September 16th, and on that day, like the only paranormal or like I guess weird thing that happened was that me and my dad it was nighttime, and we were looking at the stars because here where we live in Florida, so much light pollution, we don't really get to see stars.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So we took a moment to look at the sky and just admire the beauty and immenseness of the sky, I guess. But we noticed like a light ball, or like it was bright like a star, and it was flying across the sky, and it was completely quiet, and it was just drifting in a line across the sky, and we decided to flash it with like this flash, like a pocket light.
Yeah.
And we flashed at it, and then we noticed that I call them glow balls, but just because I don't know, that's just how I've described them my entire life. But so we shined a light at it, and we noticed that the the UFO, like
it faded to black.
Yeah, it faded away, like right when we did that.
Wow.
And we just
And also that was we've been seeing things like that for years before this, but on that property that was
the first
time for us
on that property.
Wow.
And then on the second night that we were there, the date for that was September 17th. Also, I saw another UFO in the sky, in the same, like flying in the same direction in the sky, and it didn't make any sounds. It was bright like a star, just moving across the sky. And at this time, like we didn't flash it, so it just kept going and going until I went back inside. So I saw that one by myself the second night.
Okay.
But the first night, me and my dad both saw it.
Right.
And also, before I continue, my dad just wanted to mention that on the first day that we were there, he felt like these weird vibrations in the ground.
Yeah, it was like a hum. And I asked Lisa, the landowner and friend, I said, did you feel that? And she was like, no. And I was feeling it. I felt the hum, and it was like in the ground, and I was feeling it with my feet mostly. So it felt almost kind of like it was resonating from the ground up. But that was just something I noticed. So
interesting.
Things progress on with more things similar to that.
Okay.
So continuing on like the second night that we were there, that night was like I describe it like it was the beginning of everything that of all the events that we experienced.
Okay.
So like just for a little background, a lot of my dreams that I have, some of them tend to be prophetic and show things that happen, or they have some sort of meaning to them.
Like some of them were bits and pieces come true in a week or two or three or so.
Yeah. So this night when I went to sleep, I had a nightmare, and in this nightmare I was in this dark field, and me and my dad were in the Jeep in the dream, and I received this text message on my phone, and it said, "Why did you send these pictures?" And it was like a link to just pictures that were on my phone. And then I started walking on this sidewalk that was in my dream. And to the right of the sidewalk was this like abandoned building, and on the ground in that building was this deer's head. It was like ripped off, and it was bleeding, and there was like blood everywhere, and that freaked me out in the dream. So I called my dad over, and he was looking at it and I was looking at it, and then ahead on the sidewalk there was this giant like shadowy black like Dogman werewolf creature with like tall pointed ears, and it was very tall in the dream. It was probably like 9 feet tall compared to us in the dream, and it had broad shoulders, and it was walking into this like portal, this white light portal with like this bluish rim around it, and it was walking into that portal. And then right when it did, that's when I was released from the dream, and I was awake, but I was like in a sleep paralysis. And I've only ever had that like with alien encounters before or anything like that. So I was awake, but I couldn't open my eyes, and my arms were crossed over me, and I couldn't move them, and my legs couldn't move. So I was kind of scared, but it had happened to me many times in my life, so I wasn't like deeply traumatized by it or anything. And then that's when I noticed this like pressure on my chest. It was like a heavy weight being pushed down, and you could just feel it. And my eyes were still closed, and in my mind's eye I like saw what was pushing down on it, and it was like this black mist that was just like there. And then like when I'm still laying in bed, I hear like this sound from, I guess I thought it came from the other room or something, and I heard like something heavy slide across the floor, and I was kind of scared because I was like, maybe it's a ghost or something, especially after just waking up from that nightmare. And so by now I can like move a little bit, and I chose to keep my eyes closed at this point still. And I called out to my dad to see if that was him, and no one responded. So I was kind of like a little more scared. And so I was still laying in bed, my eyes were still shut, but the sleep paralysis had kind of gone away already. And I decided I didn't want to be scared, and I didn't want this black like mist pushing down on my chest anymore. So I was laying there, and I calmed myself down and like connected with angels, and I asked the angels to remove that I guess that black mist, that negative energy that's like pushing down on me. And I asked them to like remove it and to like clear the energy in the room. And so then the pressure starts to lift off my chest, and it's like it feels lighter and lighter, and it starts to go above my head, and then it disappears. And then I finally feel relieved and like more safe to go back to sleep. So that was what happened like after the nightmare.
Wow.
And then so the next day I woke up early, but I didn't sleep good. And the first thing I did was go look out the glass door, and I sent my dad a diagram to send to you, and it's like the house that we were staying in, like a blueprint. And so I drew where the glass door was. So I peeked out the curtain of the glass door, just like the tiniest bit, and like there's this giant white hawk, and it's way larger than like a normal hawk. I would say it's like 2.5 feet. Would you say it's 2.5 feet?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, like 2.5 feet.
Tall.
It's white, and it's like kind of near like a tree, like I drew in the diagram. And it's full white, and it's got like some black and dark gray under feathers.
Okay.
I'm like looking at it, peeking out through the curtain just the tiniest bit, and right when I do that, it like takes off, but it kind of curves behind another tree, so like I'm not really able to see like how big its wings would have been, but it just flew away right when I peeked out. It didn't even look back or anything, and I just thought that was very weird because I had never seen anything like that.
Yeah, and I was
before.
shocked when you told me, because I was like, wow, that's extremely rare.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, so I didn't really know what to make of that. But so yeah, I told my dad. He was like, that's really rare and like weird and strange. But later that evening, the landowner, we went with her. Me and my dad went with her. We went to like the back perimeter of her property because she was gonna show us like where her property line was, since
We were
like
putting up no hunting posters on trees.
Yeah, that was gonna be like our task for the next couple days.
Okay.
And so when we were out there, like on the way back out, my dad noticed like in the mud that there were these huge giant canine tracks, and I'll let him describe it since he was there examining it.
So I was looking for them on the way in and then on the way out, and then I noticed them, and I said, stop the car. So we all got out and carefully got around the different tracks and took photographs, and we were trying to put things next to them. We didn't have a way to measure them then, but we had a spoon, and we also had, put my fist next to a couple of them. And later the spoon was measured to be 6 inches.
Okay.
But those were pretty impressive that we saw. And they came out of the woods and from a game preserve type area. There's thousands of acres. And then they just went down like the roadside where it was a soft mud. And the ones that turned out really well in the photographs were in more of a firm mud. And then some of the tracks were in like standing water mud, which are more eroded.
Yeah.
So that was pretty good timing for us. And that one of the tracks was really odd because it had like a fifth appendage type imprint on, and there was another one, but it wasn't as good of a photograph as the one that I got.
Okay. Now you sent me those too, I think, correct?
Yeah, those were. I mean, it took a bunch of photographs, but the ones that you got were the HD ones.
Okay.
I mean, some of the other ones weren't as focused, and they weren't. The tracks were also a little more eroded.
Okay. I'll take a look at those, and I'll post those.
All right.
And that's also where the landowner. That's also like where
her dog.
Yeah, it dawned on her that her dog, she had a medium-sized dog, and she told us that it had went missing around that area.
Yeah, back in February.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. So then we thought that was kind of strange, too.
Yeah. Yeah, she obviously missing since February, and this is already, September, you said?
Yeah, it was September, and it was the same area, too.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's like a clue. But anyway, so after we saw the tracks and like took photos, we went back to her house to eat dinner, and we were like researching and all that. But in her yard, like the first thing that I saw, like in her garden, was like on a post, a plastic white hawk was like sitting on a post. And it was the same day that I saw that giant white hawk.
And this is where we're starting to say, okay, there's some synchronicities happening here, because the landowner she never saw a white hawk. ever
Yeah.
being there. Only the plastic hawk. That's it.
Yeah.
And we're there like just got there, never been to that property before, and my daughter sees a white hawk.
Yeah. That's strange. I can't say I've ever seen one.
And then so we went there to eat dinner, and we were researching like paw prints, and we were just finding out more about like what we saw, and just coming to the conclusion that
ours were larger than large tracks. They were larger than the vast majority of wolf tracks.
Yeah, especially with that fifth claw. That's strange.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the tracks are a little interesting. I will definitely say that.
Yeah. So like when we went back to our house, like the guest house that we were staying at, it was kind of late at night, and in my dad's room, in the back of the house, there I heard like it sounded like distant thunder, like rumbling, but it wasn't too loud or anything. So I assumed it was thunder because on the forecast it was supposed to rain on like the next day. So I was thinking, maybe it's thunder, and that's all for that night. But in the next day it did rain, so that's why I still thought it was thunder that I heard the night before.
Mm-hmm.
And also we went out to put up no trespassing signs and no hunting signs on the backside of the property.
Okay.
And that was where we saw the set of tracks. That's where we saw that, and we had to go down that road. And we noticed the rain had washed the tracks away, and you couldn't see them.
They were really eroded then.
Yeah.
So, and let me also say that the tracks were measured to be 5.25 inches to 5.4 inches long.
Okay.
Based off like a spoon comparison.
Yeah, and also
That's quite a bit. Wow.
Yeah.
And my fist was measured 5 inches wide from the thumb knuckle to the muscle above the pinky knuckle.
Okay.
Yeah. But nothing happened to us in the woods that day. So at night when we're back at the house we're staying at, in my dad's room again, we were hearing like a small like animal sound, like something running through the wall. It sounded like
a chipmunk or a rat.
It sounded like little rumblings, but nothing too concerning at that point.
Mm-hmm.
But kind of like slightly annoying.
Mm-hmm.
And we looked out the window, saw nothing. So nothing else happened that day. And then the next day, Tuesday, September 20th, this is like a significant day, and I remember this day in like vivid detail. So we went back out to the backside of the property to put up more signs and trim some branches that were kind of
very forested.
Yeah, coming to the road.
Mm-hmm.
And when we're like driving in, we noticed that where we saw the first set of tracks, there's a new set of tracks that are there. They weren't as nice and as clean because the mud was more wet from the previous day's rain.
Right.
But you can still see the new tracks, and you can still see that there's this creature that has that fifth like claw that's whatever it is still out there.
Mm-hmm.
And we took some more photos, and we documented it, and we just went about our day doing the work out there. So there's a 4-wheeler road that goes up like a hill, and at the bottom of that hill is the landowner's like house and pond. Not directly at the bottom, but in that direction.
Mm-hmm.
It's a spring.
Yeah. So
say that again.
The pond is a spring head.
Okay.
So we park at the bottom of that 4-wheeler road, and we're gonna, go up there and put some more signs up. So I walk ahead and I go up by myself, and my dad's still at the Jeep. He's getting more signs and more nails, stuff like that. So about halfway up the road is very, very steep. And then after that kind of, levels off a little bit, but it's really steep the first half.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm walking by myself, and I'm about maybe halfway up or so. And then on my left, I hear this big sound. It at that moment I was like, it's something as big as a wild boar. My heart was racing, but it sounded like, something bolting off, towards the left, away from me. It was breaking branches, like medium-sized branches. It was like, you could hear all the leaves and everything. It's just like, doing all that, but loud.
Mm-hmm.
It scares me. And so there's like a set of that sound. Like, then there's a pause, and then there's another set of sounds just like that. And this one goes in a different direction. It kind of goes like up the hill, like up to the right. And that set of sound was like shorter. And so I'm scared, and I, turn around. I run down the steep hill, and I slip down. And then I finally get down to the bottom, and I'm like telling my dad what happened, and I was scared and all that. And
sure.
And I was like, you know what? Maybe it was a deer, because, at that moment I was like, nothing, attacked me or ambushed me or anything. Nothing made itself seen to me. So I was like, you know what? Maybe it was a deer. And because, I was walking, and it seemed to run away as soon as like I got, partially up that road, and I got scared at the same time I heard it.
The road was about 200 feet long.
But yeah, so I'm at the bottom now, telling my dad about it. We're there for like 5 minutes or so, and then we decide to go back up and just finish putting signs up and stuff, since we assume like whatever it was gone. And so we're going up. We're both going up at this point. And I pull out my phone camera, and I start taking pictures like in the direction I heard the sounds, and also at the top of the hill, and also on the right. And once we're at the top and on the right side, my dad notices a bunch of like structures, and I'll let him describe those.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, throughout this part of the property, there was several strange tree structures that reminded me of like Squatch type stuff. But I went and examined them, and some of the branches were like interlocked and had tension, like it was put together. It wasn't just randomly fell that way.
Right.
I also noticed a couple of trees that they crossed at the top, and they were about maybe 25 feet tall. And at the bottom was gnaw marks. And I put my boot on it and to give it a comparison. And the gnaw marks went up to about maybe right under 4 feet high on the tree. And it's pretty big. It was wider than my boot by far on some of the gnaw marks. And I'm wearing a size 11, shoe. So.
Wow.
But yeah, we saw X formation branches, and we saw tree bends and things that were snapped over fences, where it looked as if the tree, like bigger than a sapling, or maybe as big around as a baseball bat, and the impact in, and they were just snapped, and then it pushed over a fence that was probably 5 feet tall and just pressed it down. So we saw that type of stuff on the property. So,
now, is there cattle on the property?
Yeah, there's four
Yeah, there's cattle,
cows.
but not that part. This was like the highest point of elevation on a ridge, and it
Okay.
was very forested.
Okay.
Yeah, so after
And so I'm sorry to interrupt, but the property was 100 acres plus.
Okay.
yeah, so after we put up signs and took pictures of those structures and like gnaw marks, we went back to the Jeep, and then like this oil worker guy, he like pulls up and has an interaction with my dad.
Yeah, so I was sitting there, chopping some small branches, and so we small talk, and I, ask him, has he seen any abnormally large coyotes in the area?
Oh.
And he pauses, kind of looks down, and then, nope, sure haven't, And then he says, but there's coyotes out here, and a lot of them, and there's bears too. And he shows me some game camera pictures. I guess it's on his phone of both of those, and a lot of the pictures of coyotes had a lot of them, 6 to 7 of them in one photo. And the bears were just individual bears that he got. And he even mentioned a bear ran across the road when he was on a 4-wheeler. So anyway, he says, okay, y'all be safe out here, and drove off.
Yeah.
But he looked down.
Yeah, I looked down, like when he was talking about, when I asked him about the abnormal coyotes.
Okay.
And then after that happened, that oil guy, he drove off, and we were out there for a couple hours more, putting up more signs and cutting more branches. And when we were done, when we headed back out, we noticed that he had driven over the tracks, so they had like the car tire marks on
Yeah,
them.
they were a little bit kind of off of the road, where like you actually would have to kind of aim for them.
Yeah, so those were gone. So we were I was like, I'm glad we took the photos before. There. And then so when we went back home, the people fixing the Wi-Fi, they showed up, because 2 days before we got there, the landowner told us that something had like pulled the Wi-Fi
Well, yeah,
wire.
she said that the Wi-Fi stopped working, and the guys that showed up, I believe they came out and they weren't able to resolve the problem. But when they came out this time, it's 4 or 5 trucks, bucket lift trucks, and there's 2 to 3 guys in each vehicle. And what they said was kind of funny. It's like, yeah, we brought the Army this time, and they were only there for like 20 minutes, maybe a little longer, and they apparently fixed it with no problem. But they said it was strange how they noticed the cable was damaged off of a pole, maybe, I don't know, 20 feet up or something, next to a tree, and like it was torn or ripped off or something like that.
Now, I heard you correct when you said 5 trucks with 3 to 4 guys per truck?
2 to 3 guys per truck.
2 to 3 guys to fix Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they had to drive at least 40 minutes to get there, probably.
It seems like an awful amount of people to on one Wi-Fi system or one Wi-Fi connection.
I guess the guys that originally came out there might have been rookies, and just new or something, and they didn't know what they were doing. I mean, I don't know.
But yeah. There could be some apprenticeship going on still, and that's just exactly.
But I thought it was weird, that they, all that gas, on just a 15-minute fix.
Well, yeah, you can't make you can't draw a major conclusion from it, but what you can say is that that's a bit strange.
Yeah, it was strange. I mean, we didn't draw any major conclusions yet.
Right.
Yeah. And then also that day, like actually that night, we heard back in my dad's room again, we heard like the rumbling sounds, but they were, a little more amplified, a little louder, and they went on for a little longer too. And instead of sounding like a small rodent or a chipmunk, it sounded more like, maybe like a bunch of squirrels or something just running around in the wall, being annoying. Yeah, we heard that. And but again, we didn't really put too much concern into it at that time.
Kind of ruled it off as some sort of animal,
Yeah.
Sure.
Small animal.
And then also that night, I remember I was in my room reading, and I heard like these, like, I thought at the time they were like sliding glass door sounds, like a like that kind of sound. And I kept hearing that like in my room, which was like on the other side of the house, and I kept hearing that, and I was like, that's really strange. And this is when I started thinking maybe it's a ghost we're dealing with or something.
Right. I remember you telling me.
Yeah. Just because like I didn't really know where to pinpoint that sound to. And then the next day, on like the Wednesday, September 21st, that was the day my dad, he went up and cleaned the gutters, and then he noticed like on the back side of the house where there's no light, that the bottom row of screws was kind of like pushed up, like it wasn't all the way screwed down. And he said he just noticed that, and just didn't really think too much of it, but just
it was something I ended up requesting to fix for my friend's house. So,
and these were screws on the gutter.
Yeah, I was cleaning out the gutter, and I noticed that I saw some of the roof screws with the little rubber washers, because it's a metal roof.
I gotcha. Okay.
Picking up.
Yeah, they got okay, kind of a grommeted screw.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, and then that night again, the sounds were even louder this time, and they sounded like possibly raccoons, because we were thinking maybe they're raccoons at this point.
We ruled out squirrels.
Yeah. And it was like this time there was like more taps and more like thuds rather than just full rumblings.
Yeah, bangs and thuds and taps.
Yeah, and it sounded like maybe something a raccoon size or something like that. But this is also like the first night that I noticed like this sound. I kind of describe it like when an AC turns on, like you hear that sound just is there now.
Like,
when before that it wasn't.
Okay.
It's like when the rumblings and thuds and taps started happening. And you walk into my dad's room, it's like you hear this sound, but
and I
it's
could
like
feel it in my chest.
Yeah, but it's really kind of low at first. For the first time I hear it, it's low,
right?
But you can notice it and feel it.
And I was staying in the master bedroom, by the way. So if you're looking at the little blueprint, you have a better orientation of where things were.
Okay.
Yeah. Also, in the master bedroom is the only bathroom that was functional. So, that night I had to get up to pee at like 3 a.m. And I had to go in that back room and use the bathroom. And I noticed like my bladder was uncomfortable, and it was like kind of slightly hurting a little bit. And I've never experienced that really ever before.
Same here. I had the same problem.
And so on my way back to my room, I noticed that the back door, the deadbolt is unlocked, and I'm like freaking out. And so I call my dad to wake up. He's in his room. I'm like, can you come here? I'm like shouting, and I'm asking him if he unlocked the door while I was in the bathroom, and he was asleep, so he said no. And
Sure.
And I was concerned, because I was like, what? We locked the door before we go to sleep.
Yeah, double check it too.
Yeah, and so we locked it back, and we were thinking maybe it's like some kind of ghost or poltergeist or something messing around. So I take my dad's Chihuahua. Her name is Smalley, so I took her with me to my room to sleep. And as I was laying down, I heard those like sliding glass, like that kind of sound again. And I guess that kind of affirmed to me like maybe we're dealing with a ghost. But the next morning, like another notable thing is the next morning, Smalley, the little Chihuahua, he was under my bed when I woke up. And, she doesn't ever do that.
She never does anything like that.
Yeah. And, she was all curled up and like scared. And so that kind of scared me. And I was like, well, maybe it really is a ghost or something that like spooked her. And especially since that deadbolt was, unlocked, that was kind of like an actual physical thing that was changed. And then, so also that night again, the sounds were again louder, longer. They kept progressing like each night that we were there. And the hums would get louder, like slightly louder. And then also the dinks on the window.
Yeah, the dinks started, happening, and they sounded like you take a coin and just tap the window, and it's like dink. And I would notice that, and I would look out the window with a flashlight, nothing, so I was like, man, what is doing that, and we were still thinking kind of ghost type of,
Right, of course.
That answer at that time.
Yeah. And then also on that night, when I was laying in bed reading, I heard like this sound like outside, and it sounded like something walking like in like wettish, marshy grass, kind of. It sounded like that. And I heard that, and I mentioned it to my dad the next morning, and we couldn't pinpoint where it came from exactly, but it sounded like it was on the outside of that hallway, outside of the house. But we still, we're saying maybe it's a ghost. And so on Friday, on the September 23rd, my dad, he installed new screws on the roof, and we noticed like there's like a drip line from the roof on that side of the house, and the grass there was like wet and kind of like
it was
slushy.
Because the gutter was clogged up, and the water would overflow on the gutter and just pour down on the ground.
Okay.
Yeah, and we noticed like some like depressions in that like wet, marshy area, but nothing that was defined. So nothing,
So that what happened is water accumulated, and it was like standing water, and it was like a very long it was as long as the mobile home was. The depression was maybe 5-6 inches, about 3 to 4 inches deep, and maybe 10 inches wide, a foot wide, give or take. And it was grass, but it was always standing water in it.
Okay. Drip line.
And it just seemed to accumulate there.
Right.
Even because of the slope of the yard too.
And then also, again at night, it was always at night, like, we'd go to my dad's room and we'd hear like the hums getting a little bit louder each night, and like the thuds and the rumblings, the tappings, and the like hits and stuff. We heard that still, and like every time it got louder and longer and more like annoying and concerning at the same time.
Getting more powerful than her.
Yeah. And anyway, and also at that night I heard like like light tapping on my side of the house. I heard like light tapping. It wasn't nearly as loud as my dad's room, but it was still something I could hear. And I remember I called like my dad over, and I would be like, do you hear this? And, you know, sometimes he would, sometimes he wouldn't, you know, depending if it was making it while he was there or not. And also, like, you know, during our stay, like, throughout the entire time, there would be, like, different times at night that, like, I would hear a noise, and I would be like, I would ask my dad if he made it, and he would say no. And there would be,
and I would come ask.
And then, and there would be nights or different times at night where my dad would hear some noise and ask if it was me, and I said it wasn't me. But that night when I heard the light tapping, my dad turned off my light in my room, and the light flickered for like a split second, and then it turned off. But it was like the next morning that when I tried to turn the light switch back on, the bulb had went out. It went out. And so we had to replace it that day.
Okay.
And that's also kind of what made me think ghost again, or something that can affect, you know, electrical interference. And then also that night, the sounds were still going on, and we were trying to, you know, come to a conclusion as to what it was, because, you know, it didn't sound like a raccoon anymore. It's starting to get louder. And also as the sounds got louder and longer, we would also notice like the trailer that was parked outside had a motion sensor light, and we would notice, like, looking out the glass window, that it would be activated.
Yeah, it had a light that was always on, like 4 bulbs. But when something moved in front of it, like not a cat, but it had to be, you know, like a Labrador Retriever size or a human, then it would go to like 8 bulbs. And the 8 bulbs was always on when I looked out, you know, generally around hearing sounds and stuff. I go out and the 8 bulbs on, the little motion light was on.
Okay. Is there any trees in that area, high weeds or anything?
No trees were around the mobile home. They were all about maybe 30 feet away or so, right?
Okay.
Probably.
Okay.
And also in relation to the sounds and that light, we would notice that Smalley, the little chihuahua, we would notice, since we kept her in the master bathroom with a little doggy door, that she would always like beg to come out and be picked up. And we would either put her on my dad's bed and she would bolt under the covers, or I'll put her in my room.
And that would generally be just like a couple minutes before the tapping and knocking started, that she would get uncomfortable and start whimpering and stuff.
And that's not a normal behavior that she normally does.
No, not at all.
Yeah, she's really mean sometimes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And also in relation to that, throughout the night, staying there, I'd have to get up and pee, but also have like a uncomfortable bladder. And my dad said he complained of the same thing.
Yeah.
And so I just thought it'd be, it's interesting how all 4 of those things kind of, you know, relate to each other. So on Sunday the 25th, we heard more sounds, again, always at night. But and
on the dark, generally the areas outside where there was no light or not much at all.
But still, like, we didn't have any evidence to like come to a conclusion as to what it was. But at this point, like at the end of the first week, it was definitely larger than a raccoon or a couple raccoons.
Okay.
We were kind of like, you know, we just didn't know what it was. And also that night I heard the sliding glass door sounds, like the shoo, 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 that kind of sound. And so I just, you know, I guess I still thought it was a ghost or something, you know. And that night I heard like I was in my room and I heard like these heavy. It sounded like heavy, like stomping footsteps
Mm-hmm.
in the hallway by my room, and so I called my dad over. I was like, um, "Was that you?" And before I said that, I heard his footsteps, and his sounded completely different. So it wasn't him. And that's also when I heard like a slap on the wall, but it sounded like it came from the outside, and I could hear it like through my room from like the hallway. It was like a slap, and so I just thought that was kind of strange. And like shortly after that happened, like within minutes, in my room, like on the right side, I saw this like white flash. It was kind of like a bright flash, and it kind of turned into like a line sort of. Um and I saw that, and my dad didn't see it, and that's kind of all that happened that night. And I still kind of, believe maybe it's a ghost or something that's trying to mess around.
It was definitely very bizarre. I was concerned because it was kind of like unexplainable. We didn't know for sure what was going on.
Yeah.
Well, something like that, typically, if it's an animal, whether it's bats or raccoon or squirrels or rats or mice, usually things like that, and I can speak from experience. When we lived in state parks, we lived in a house for a number of years where my dad retired, and we had bats in the attic, and we actually had there could have been some other birds, but it was always consistent. It never got louder. There's occasions where they were really loud as far as scratching, but for the most part, everything remained consistent. So when you have any type of critters, let's just call them critters like that, they're usually very consistent. They may have moments where they're, all, trying to get comfortable and nest and all that. But as far as getting louder, and that's not typically something that you hear often. So, I've learned that, and this past couple of years, I've been more involved in this, let's just say, apparitions or paranormal type of spirit apparitions. And now, if it was a poltergeist, usually a poltergeist is something that will manifest through a person living at the place. In other words, they bring on that entity, not willingly, it's unknowingly. And so something like what you're talking about, a question that I have, and we'll continue on here, I don't want to deviate too much, but is that usually, is this place, was there anyone that lived there for a number of years that built the place? Was there any battlegrounds that took place there? Any skirmishes? Is there a burial site there? Was there a terrible accident that happened years ago, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, well, okay.
To interrupt, the thing that kind of led us to, believe that it could have been a ghost, was that the landowner had told us that she had like a groundskeeper type, older man live in that house, and he had died a couple years back. But we don't know if he died in the house or, where he died at, but that's kind of why I was thinking maybe those sounds are, ghosts or, something like that.
Yeah, it's very plausible.
There's a cemetery less than a half a mile, maybe about a third of a mile away, and it's kind of remote, and it's near the forest area.
Okay, that's a possible, probable issue right there too. It's very likely.
There's an Indian mound not too far away also. It's a little further than the cemetery, but it's still in the region.
Yeah, I mean, anything like that is possible. Now, we're also, talking about cryptids, creatures here as well. Could they do things like that? It's possible, but it's if this happened, typically you said something earlier about tapping or these sounds coming from the dark side of the house.
Right.
Did you notice they were always coming from the dark side of the house?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, and you couldn't see anything outside. There was no motion light outside of that window on that side of the house.
The side that had the motion light on it was on the front, but toward the back, and you can still activate it by being in the dark area, because I went out and noticed that when I was doing some work, it would come on when I came from the back area of the house. It would come on because when I was out there working one night, not late, but it just started getting dark, and I noticed it sensed me before I even walked in front of it.
Well, I will tell you one thing that I did experience that I want to say it's by accident. That, and this is just my opinion, but I noticed it here where I live. So I did an interview on my front porch. Long story short, there were some EVPs that came over it, and I didn't hear it. And then it was played. It was a guy interviewing me on a podcast show of his, and there was a subscriber that said, "Hey Lance, you got EVPs all over this interview."
Wow.
And
Wow.
I'm like, I something about me is I hardly go back and listen to a show that I did. I'm when I do shows, it's kind of one and done typically.
Yeah.
And I just happened to be scrolling through the comments, and he said, "Lance, you got EVPs all over it. This minute and second, this minute and second, this minute second." And I'm like, "What?" So I go back and I listen, and he was 100% correct.
Wow.
My jaw dropped. That was during the time that I had also been at by accident, I didn't know it was an Indian burial site that we were at. So many people know about that. I've been down there several times. I did a show a couple months ago on it. But what was interesting during that time when I did that interview is I have motion lights all the way around my house, front, backs, and sides. And there's one motion light in front of my house that there is large trees, but very rarely does the wind set anything off. There's no weeds whatsoever because it's just pointing at a nice lawn that's mowed all the time. So this light rarely goes off. Rarely. If you're driving up my drive, it goes off, and if you're walking around in the front yard at night, it will go off. What was strange during that time, and this is after the fact, I kind of put things together. During that time that I did that interview, and there was all these EVPs, which I didn't know till after the fact, about a month later. But during that time, that front light was going off like crazy. And when we'd have rabbits or something go across, it would go off, obviously. I put it on
Right.
high sensitivity. Well, it kept going off, and my wife would be on the front porch. Her and I in the evenings were looking at that like, what set that off? There's no wind. There's no rabbit. There's no deer. No one's up the driveway. We're not walking around. It would go off at least 15 to 20 times while we were out there in an hour.
Wow.
And that never happened before. And we had already lived here 2 years. So I wonder if the postulating here that if those solar lights are so sensitive that it can pick up spiritual entities.
That's a good point.
That's a great point. Yeah.
Because, and I tell you, here's what led me to this. I did a blessing of my house after that. After I heard that EVP, I did blessings and walked around my house, and every window sash, doorway, entrance. I have a small house, so it didn't take long. Everything stopped. I never had that light do that since, and that was early in the summer. And I've had wind events, I've had rain. That light never goes off unless you physically step in front of it. And so I did blessings around my house, and it's not happened since.
Wow.
Coincidence? Don't know. I doubt it. Part of me says no, it's not a coincidence. But anyway, I just share that with you because you talked about the solar light here, and I thought that was fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, once you hear
That
the
brings
whole
more
story,
insight to some like theories that I can
I think there's a whole lot going on this property.
It
That's all I
sounds
got.
like it. I mean, up to this point, yes. And of course, as you guys are alluding to so well, is that it's not out of the question. People have a lot of spirit paranormal things going on, as well as cryptid things going on in the same locale.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah. This
It's
place
it's
kind
not
of
out of the
like,
question. Go ahead. I'm
yeah.
sorry.
Yeah, after we left, it was kind of like a Skinwalker Ranch type of deal out there. But
Yeah, and who knows the stories, the backstory of really what's out there and have been going on, and who lived there years ago, even prior to that gentleman that you're not sure of who passed. I mean,
Yeah.
who knows the back history? We mean, unless you, I
yeah,
mean, you can find out if you do some deep digging.
we're
Um,
going
I'm
to do that.
sure.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. So is it fine to continue?
Yes, yes, please go ahead.
So after like seeing that light flash, after seeing that, that's also kind of what I thought, would have been like something like a ghost or something. At that time, that's what I was thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And now this is the next day is Monday, September 26th, and a lot of things happened on this day that were like, the behaviors of the different animals and stuff like that I documented, because in the days leading up to like the encounter, all these little things kind of just build up, and then it makes sense, and then it's like, after looking back, it's like, wow, everything, the animals are telling us something.
Exactly.
So anyway, on Monday, September 26th, the landowner, she told us that she had heard a howl in the morning, and she never hears those. And she told us that, and so I guess we, didn't really, I don't know what we did with that information.
I mean, it was still an eyebrow raiser.
Yeah. But she
nothing,
didn't see anything, so we were kind of
nothing
like,
major.
yeah, nothing major at that point.
Okay.
But later in the afternoon is like when Smalley, our Chihuahua, my dad's Chihuahua, we had been keeping her outside during the day on like a harness and like a tether, and like that afternoon she had pulled out of her harness and like tried to get back like towards the house. She tried to run back up the steps on the porch, and up to that point she had never done that before, so we thought that behavior was really strange. And I brought her back in immediately, because I was like, she's a small dog, and
she seemed worried.
Yeah, so it was for her protection. I brought her back in, and so my dad was staining the porch that day, and came over and was kind of doing her own thing, and she had her little dog with her, and her little dog kept barking in the direction that Smalley ran away from, and I kind of noticed that. I thought that was weird, and she was talking to my dad on the porch, and then my dad hears some coyote yips in the distance, and at that same time we heard her other dog. She has a larger dog, and we heard it like barking and like crazy back at her house.
He's like a pit bull mix,
yeah,
with like I don't know, Australian Shepherd or Australian Blue Heeler or something.
Yeah, okay. It was a mix, and he was barking like crazy back at her place. So I took in that information because that's important, I thought. And so I remember my dad was telling me about like the strange sounds that we were hearing, like the bangs on the house and all that, and
the taps, the knocks, the thuds.
Yeah. So I remember he was telling her about that, and she didn't really know what we were talking about. So my dad was like, well, let me bang on the house and, give you an idea of what we're kind of hearing.
Sure.
So I go in with, and we were standing in my dad's room where we hear the sounds like every single night. And my dad's banging on the side of the house, like with his fist, just banging with all his might. And even then, he was only like 70% as loud as this thing as it progressed to be.
And I'm 6 foot and 190 pounds, 20 years martial arts experience. And I was, impacting it with a good solid hammer fist,
Mm-hmm.
on the vinyl siding.
Well,
Yeah.
that almost tells me that, and this is just what my logic says, that it wasn't from the outside that you heard it then. It was from the inside of the wall, possibly. I mean, it's a thought, but go ahead.
Yeah, and so I was like, my dad's like banging on the house wasn't like as intricate or rhythmic as like what we were hearing, like the taps and the the bangs and the thuds. They kind of like they weren't as like bang 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 like my dad's was. And then of course I also banged on the wall a couple times, but it kind of hurt my fist too much to do it, and even I wasn't even loud like that. And that's kind of all that happened. And let me see here.
And then the dinks
wait.
are still going too.
Yeah. And so what also happened like later in the evening was after we did the demonstration of what we were dealing with, she came back about like half an hour later, and she had locked the gate before she left. And it was the first time that she locked the gate the entire time we were there. And what was weird is also the day she heard the howl. And in my mind, I thought that was kind of weird.
Yeah.
A little concerning. Anyway, so she met me at the gate like half an hour after she had left, and I just gave her some bleach and she gave me some lotion. And then like right when we were doing that, a neighbor is like driving by and pulls over and tells her that her donkeys had gotten out and they were like down the road in somebody else's yard, and Lisa didn't know that they were, so she was kind of upset about that.
Mm-hmm.
And they never get out of their place. They never get out, really, ever. It's rare. So that was also strange behavior from the donkeys. And so later that night, I decided to go through my phone and go through the photos that I took a week ago or so. Whenever I heard the sounds in the woods, I had taken photos. So I went back and I was looking at them that night, and then I zoom in on one of the photos, and I noticed like in the woods.
That was where you were standing.
I noticed in the forest that there's a big like black wolf looking creature with the the ears, and I'm like, that's really strange. So I take a little screenshot of it, I send it to my dad, and I'm still analyzing the photo, and then I see like in the corner there's like this weird deer creature,
right?
And I screenshot that, and when I screenshot them and send them to my dad's like, oh my god, that's like a Dogman, like you captured something.
Yeah, I looked at it over and over, and I zoomed in on it, and I was looking for features of the ears and like eyes, and I could see the the eye sockets, and I could see the nostrils and the mouth closed though, and it was tucked. This creature was tucked back in the foliage 50 feet, 60 feet back, and it was where she was standing, where she got startled from the animal that bolted off. It was in that area where she took that photo.
Now, did you send me that photo as well?
Yeah.
Okay, I think I've seen that already. Yes, go ahead.
Yep. Taken right at 11:11.
Yeah.
Okay.
And a lot of what happened to us, always would be talking about something that we just heard, and it'd be like 333 or 1111 or 222 or 1212. You know, it was just really not, those numbers were always happening with a lot of this stuff. So, okay, what's.
And yeah, so we noticed the picture was taken at 11:11, and then again, you know, it's routine at this point. Like the sounds are back, the hum is back. You know, everything is just louder.
Still the bladder pain.
Yeah.
Dinks on the window.
Yeah, and you know, dinks, taps, all that kind of stuff.
And the bangs and thuds were a little more impact. They were solid and heavy.
Yeah, and you know, it just progressed and got longer and louder. Both concerning, both and also annoying.
Did this happen consistently at a certain time at night?
I'm not sure like exactly what
I
time.
would say, yeah.
It always happened at night though, and usually later in the night. But I'm not really sure like if it happened exactly at a certain time or not.
Okay.
I would say what I remember, at least a couple of hours after it was dark, maybe around like 9 o'clock.
Okay.
Or you know, I'm just kind of assuming that when I was hearing the stuff, the sounds, it was between like 9 and 11 o'clock, and after that, you know, it was very consistent every day.
Well, and that's kind of what I was. Sometimes when there are entities present at a location, a home, a building, a barn, it's usually the sounds, the whether it's vocalizations, and we're not talking cryptid here, but there's sounds, they usually repeat at a certain time. A lot of these entities repeat their activities. They're caught in this never-ending cycle. So usually the time frame is consistent over and over and over. So that's why I asked. I don't know if that's what's going on, but I thought I would just ask there. But please continue.
All right. And so the next morning we went to bed late at night, analyzing the photos and stuff. So the next morning, my dad told me that he woke up from his sleep and like zooming in on the photos, and he saw like this like gray alien figure like next to the Dogman, and I saw it too after he pointed it out.
I woke up, I don't know, probably like 2 in the morning or so, and I grabbed the phone and looked at that photo, and I looked at it, you know, like for about 15 minutes, and I noticed that I was like, that looks just like the gray aliens. That's kind of a humanoid, and it wasn't cloaked, and it had all the features that a gray alien does, with the almond eyes that are black, and it had the humanoid bipedal legs, and the arms that were the right arm was on the left forehead of the Dogman wolf face. And then I looked at the trees, the leaves around the picture to see if it could give me a size. So I was looking at the width of like the branches, and it looks like it was maybe about 3 feet tall, I would say, by the width of the trees. But I'm not sure. I'm just trying to, piece together the whole picture by looking at the surrounding vegetation. But it was definitely not something where I had to turn the photo sideways and upside down to see it. It was there, and we drew a illustration.
Yeah, I do have that. Thank you for doing that.
And I did let a few other people, look at my phone and see that. I was like, hey, do you see the same thing? And people saw that, without me really saying what was where.
Okay. Yeah, that's a very fascinating photo right there. So I'll be showing that with your permission.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah. So I thought that photo was, like you said, very fascinating, and um, you know, I thought it was a good photo that I
Definitely
happened to
revealing it.
take.
It changed the whole. When we saw that, we started saying,
Yeah, it kind of,
what about Grays being involved with all this instead of Ghost? You
yeah.
know.
Well, I'm willing to say anything is possible. I've just learned to be very, very open minded. You don't. I'm careful about using my biases, self biases, on saying something. Oh, that couldn't be, and this could be, and that could be. It's you have to remain open minded in order to learn, and
Yeah.
so if I eject my bias to say, oh, it couldn't be that, well, what am I comparing it to? I'm comparing, if I say something like that, or when someone says something like that, I'm comparing it to my reference, and my reference is that I've never seen it, or I don't want to believe it, or I don't want to acknowledge it. Therefore, I'm like, it couldn't be that. When actually, I don't have any really solid reference at all. It's just an opinion. But
Yeah.
I'm with you. Is it possible or plausible? Sure, absolutely.
And the Grays are supposed to be geneticists. That's according to like the experts in that field that study that.
When you
But
say that, they're like, you're saying that's the race of ET that is supposed to be
it's like a scientist.
the scientist. Okay, okay, I'm with you now.
Yeah. But yeah, I also take that approach to, like, just be as open-minded as possible. Um, especially, like, this whole experience was very eye-opening for me, and after coming back, um I'm definitely more inclined to research a whole lot more.
Hmm.
But anyway, back to the day, Tuesday, September 27th. um my dad, he unloaded some windows with one of the neighbors that was
Yeah.
helping out, and they also worked on the roof that day. But my dad had, like, an interaction with him that he thought was kind of significant, kind of.
Okay.
Right. So while I was working with this guy that was got local handyman,
Okay.
he, before I was going to ask him about, you know, coyotes and if he'd seen any, and you know, just try to start a conversation about it. But
Yeah.
before I got to that point, he said, "You better watch your little one." You're talking about the little Chihuahua. He said the coyotes will come out of the hill and snatch her up. And he said, "I noticed the yipping and howling started about when you guys got here." And I thought I said, that was weird. That's really weird. I said, I can't believe he asked me that because, or told me that, because I was just about to ask him about coyotes. I was like, so bizarre.
Yeah.
Hmm. So he's obviously been around there enough times that he is well aware of the normal to state what the abnormal is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And
Mm-hmm.
it could have been our little dog making noise and attracted stuff, attract
Smell.
smell,
Yeah.
or, the smell of
Coyotes smell many miles away. Most predators can smell. Most indigenous sized, normal sized predators throughout the U.S. can smell miles away. Something's
right.
dead, bleeding, anything like that. That's just the way they're designed. My buddy Wiley, that's on our team, he calls them land sharks because because sharks can smell blood miles away in the water. Well,
Wow.
very similar and analogous is the coyote on land. They can smell blood miles away. Now, that's the most typical predator we're aware of, but we have mountain lions and fox, and in many ways, raccoons are predators. They'll eat chickens just like possums
Yeah.
and things like that. But as far as predators, bobcats, it falls in line with mountain lions or pumas,
Right.
and coyotes, all the same. But interesting, very interesting. He, made that assessment.
Yeah, and it was just the next word, when I was about to ask him that right there on the spot,
Mm.
and it's basically read my mind. It seemed like,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
but yeah. So
And, like, when they were all working on the roof, I noticed, like, he was very, comfortable on the roof, and he did the screws in the mobile home that we were staying at.
Yeah.
So, and he seemed very genuine. So I was like, he doesn't seem like someone who would do like, subpar work.
He did thorough work. And
so that was kind of just like something that made us wonder, like, why were the screws
all lifted up on the dark side of the house, plucked out of the wood, only on the bottom row, almost all the way down, which is about 8.5 feet up high.
Yeah, so that was just kind of like a something to think about, that we were thinking about.
Oh, absolutely. That's a very interesting observation.
Yeah, and so like always at night, the sounds came back, and also this was the day that my dad said he heard like these little like growl sounds.
Yeah, like out in the front of the house, toward where my trailer was, I heard something that was like, wow. It's kind of like a bigger dog with a little pesky dog bothering it, and it just kind of like growled at it.
Okay.
And that's what I heard. But it wasn't like a really low sound. It was, I heard it through the house, through the windows, like a big open room with big windows, and I heard it from outside. So that kind of startled me, because I was like, oh crap, there's a canine type animal outside.
Mm-hmm.
And like that night also, the sounds were, very loud, very, they lasted a long time.
It's drawn out. More, less breaks. We normally got breaks, and 20-minute breaks between impacts when they would hit and make taps and bangs.
Yeah, and like the way some of the banging was, it was kind of like if you bang with one fist and then the other hand is doing like a piano kind of movement with your fingers, like tap 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 tap.
Kind of a pattern.
Like a pattern, and it's kind of like doing it almost like at the
boom,
same time.
Boom,
but it's happening at the same time. Yeah. And yeah, so that's why I was saying it was more complex than just my dad banging with his fist on the side of the wall. It was not like that.
Okay.
And also that night when I was in my room, I heard like some coyote yips. I heard them outside, but I was in my room and I heard them, kind of like at a distance. And I also heard like the sliding glass door sounds, like the that kind of sound. Yeah, and after I had told my dad about them, that sound, over and over, I think it was one of the days he was working on the roof or something like that. He said he moved his hand.
Well, yeah, it was when I was cleaning the side of the vinyl and stuff, washing it and scrubbing it, and I noticed like the sound was like that sound she was describing, like the hand going across with the rag and the brush and stuff on the vinyl. And it made like a so that could have been from the outside, and you were hearing something make a movement on the side of the house.
Okay. I know what kind of sound you're talking about now.
Yeah.
And that could have been the floor sliding sound, where you thought you heard something sliding across the floor too, where it was actually the vinyl on the side of the house.
Yeah. But that's like what I heard and my dad heard that night. The next day is September 28th. It's Wednesday, and this is I guess like the most significant day, because this is when my dad saw the creature. But before he saw it, the sounds at night, were still progressing and just loud and annoying. And,
and it was,
and like it disrupted our sleep, like basically every night. So like I remember my dad was kind of frustrated, and he was like looking out the window with the flashlight, trying to see if anything was out there. And then that's when we went outside.
Yeah, after hearing enough of the sounds, it was getting to be extremely annoying,
Mm-hmm.
irritating,
Sure.
and we weren't sleeping that well because of all of the banging and knocking, and also the hums or whatever. But we were worried. I was gonna go check it out, and so I got my flashlight, and it was a bright, spotlight almost. And I went out the back door, and which is on the dark side of the house. And I wasn't gonna go like walk around the house. I was just gonna, go out on the steps
Right.
and look and see what I could see. And so I went out and took a few steps out of the back door, and I shined my light around the immediate area I was in for a second or two, and then I pointed the light back toward the back of the house. To What I saw was shocking, and it was like, I was kind of like, well, heart problems. I had like it was like, um, it startled me so much, and I saw it and it scared me, and what I saw was a hyena wolf hybrid type animal that was kind of creeping like a female lion away from the house. The back of the house was about 30 feet away from me, and then it was maybe another 35 feet behind the back of the house, more or less.
It was
And
walking away from you?
yeah, there was another big field, like a cattle field, but there was no cows in it.
Okay.
And it was slightly angled, but mainly I could see the whole side of the body. And as soon as I pointed the light at it, it was like it was already turned its head toward the light, like a split second. And it had the bright orange, yellow, amber looking eyes. And it had like, I felt like a weird feeling, like hair on the back of my neck was standing up, and I was,
Mm-hmm.
heart's racing. And it stood right next to a gate. That was the gate's about 4 feet and 4 inches or so tall, and it was maybe the hump on the back was maybe slightly below that. I'm just guessing about 6 inches or so. And
Mm.
the light that I had, I was able to see the fur color, I mean, and it was gray and charcoal gray, almost black. And it had like a mane around the neck, not a really shaggy one like a lion, but not as long. And I didn't really see teeth, so it looked like the mouth was closed. But it could have been slightly open. I don't know. But the ears were straight up, kind of at an angle though, but they were still up. And it had a tail, but I didn't really focus on the tail. I was looking more at the face and the shoulder area. And it was quadrupedal at the time. It was very muscular looking, and it sloped back, was really strange and eerie. It didn't match of anything that I could identify with, although I wasn't going into this blind. I had a background researching stuff. It still looked different than what a lot of the drawings and things that I've seen. And I couldn't tell if it had the raccoon hands in the front, with the opposable thumbs.
Mm-hmm.
I just saw it on all fours, and it had that crouch like a female lion. It reminded me of like a saber-toothed tiger type of build from like a prehistoric mammals book, because of the sloped back going from the shoulders in the front to the rear legs. It was definitely something abnormal about it.
Did you get a feeling? Did it turn and look at you? I mean, I know you said it kind of startled. It saw you.
Yeah, it was like beaming its eyes right at me. It was like focused on me. Like I think if I stayed out there like one more second, it would have ran toward me. But I don't know. It didn't growl. It didn't really do anything but look at me. And that's when the head, I could see the muscle in the shoulder,
Mm-hmm.
and there was some movement. It wasn't just totally still. And the head turned at me, but it was like like when I shined the light on, I saw the head movement, and it didn't look like the muscle movement of any other animal I've ever seen anywhere. You know,
Okay.
there's something strange and different about the muscle in the neck and the front paw, or the shoulder. I mean, because I saw that.
So how did you respond? Did you were you still?
When
Did you drop the
I
light?
opened the house, locked up the doors, locked up all the windows, and I was talking to my daughter just frantically, and you can, chime in on. And I ended up calling the landowner, and I'm like, that thing, and there's some giant wolf creature out there right now. Fire your gun off, And she's like, let me find it. And her dog was just going crazy in the background. It was an outside dog, the big dog,
Mm-hmm.
and barking and cutting up, making noise. And she's like, something's spooking, my dog out there. And I said, yeah, it's this thing. Shoot your gun now, And so she fired off a couple shots, within about a minute or two or so. And then no more sounds that night. Zero. It was like a peaceful night. Slept good, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we actually slept deep and rested.
But still scared.
Yeah, and but I was just shaking. My hands were shaking after I went in the house, and we were locking all the windows. And
Sure. How far was she away from you guys where you were staying?
800, 900 feet away.
Okay. So there was no other sounds that night? Nothing in the walls, nothing banging, nothing like that?
Nothing. Absolutely quiet.
Hmm.
That was when I was thinking then that the hums were infrasound, and the bladder pain was from infrasound, because lions have it, other big large cats, use infrasound, and I think it could cause fear and even bladder issues. But I was really relieved that night.
Yeah.
It was like a really different vibration into the house. It was more calm and laid back feeling. You could feel rested when you woke up.
That's interesting.
Yep.
Very interesting.
We still were factoring in together the photos, like, well, in our head we're thinking, okay, UFOs, grays, Dogman, what all's going on? Maybe poltergeist too. We don't know. We just trying to piece things together.
Sure. Oh yeah.